You are a thief and a liar, and you will pay for your crimes against this pack." The words echoed through the grand hall of the royal court, each syllable striking Lila like a physical blow. She stood in the center of the marble floor, her hands bound with silver chains that burned against her skin, surrounded by hundreds of pack members who had gathered to witness her judgment. The High Council sat elevated on their ornate thrones, their faces carved from stone and judgment, while whispers rippled through the crowd like poison spreading through water. Lila had always been invisible in the Moonstone Pack, a shadow moving through the palace kitchens, an omega without a wolf, without a voice, without value. But now, every eye in the kingdom was fixed on her, and she had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable, more utterly alone. "The evidence is irrefutable," Lady Vivian declared, her voice smooth as silk and twice as deadly. She stood before the council in a gown of deep emerald that caught the light from the crystal chandeliers above. Her dark hair swept into an elegant twist, every inch the sophisticated noblewoman. Lady Vivian was the king's most trusted advisor, a widow of impeccable breeding whose counsel had guided the Moonstone Pack through countless political storms. No one would suspect her of anything less than absolute loyalty. No one except Lila, who had seen her 3 nights ago in the forgotten wine cellar beneath the palace, meeting with 2 hooded figures and discussing the exact location where the Alpha King would stand during the festival of the full moon. "The sacred moonstone pendant was found in her quarters," Vivian continued, holding up a velvet pouch, "hidden beneath her mattress like the guilty secret it is. This pendant has protected our pack for 300 years, and this Omega dared to steal it for her own selfish purposes." Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to scream that it was a lie, that she had never seen that. Pendant before the guards tore apart her tiny room and miraculously discovered it exactly where Vivian said it would be. She wanted to tell them about the conspiracy, about the assassination plot she had overheard, about how Vivian had seen her in the cellar doorway and how everything had unraveled from that single moment of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the words stuck in her chest like shards of glass, because who would believe her? An Omega without a wolf accusing the most respected woman in the kingdom? It would sound like the desperate invention of a cornered criminal. The silver chains grew hotter against her wrists, and Lila bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, using the pain to anchor herself, to keep from collapsing under the weight of her own helplessness. Does the accused have anything to say in her defense? The voice belonged to Elder Marcus, the head of the High Council, a man whose gray beard reached his chest and whose eyes held no warmth, no mercy, only the cold calculation of law and order. Lila met his gaze and saw her fate already written there. They had decided her guilt before she ever entered this hall. The trial was merely theater, a show of justice for a conclusion already determined. Still, she had to try. She had to fight, even if it was futile, because the alternative was accepting that her life, her truth, her very existence meant nothing. "I did not steal the pendant," Lila said, and her voice came out, smaller than she intended, barely carrying past the first row of onlookers. She cleared her throat and tried again, forcing strength into words that felt fragile as spider silk. "I have served this pack faithfully for 5 years. I have never taken anything that did not belong to me. I swear on the moon itself, I am innocent." The declaration hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before laughter erupted from somewhere in the crowd, cruel and mocking, and others joined until the sound swelled into a wave that crashed over her. Heat flooded Lila's cheeks, shame burning hotter than the silver at her wrists, and she dropped her gaze to the floor because she could not bear to see the amusement in their faces, the complete dismissal of her words as if she had told a joke rather than spoken the truth. "Enough." Lady Vivian's command cut through the laughter like a blade through flesh, and silence fell instantly. She moved closer to Lila with steps that were liquid grace, her perfume reaching Lila's nose, something expensive and floral that made her stomach turn. "I understand you are frightened, child," Vivian said, and her tone was almost kind, almost sympathetic, which made it so much worse. "But lying will only make your punishment more severe. Confess your crime, show remorse, and perhaps the council will show leniency." Her hand reached out as if to touch Lila's shoulder in comfort, but Lila flinched away instinctively. Something flashed in Vivian's eyes, something cold and satisfied, before her expression smoothed back into concern. "You see?" Vivian addressed the council. "She cannot even accept compassion. Guilt has hardened her heart. The trap was perfect. Every word Lila spoke in her defense became evidence of her deception. Every reaction was interpreted through the lens of predetermined guilt. She was drowning in quicksand, and every movement to save herself only pulled her deeper. Lila's breathing quickened, her chest tight with rising panic, and she forced herself to focus on something, anything, to keep from spiraling completely. Her eyes found the great windows that lined the eastern wall of the hall, tall arches of stained glass depicting the moon in its various phases. Moonlight streamed through them now, painting colored patterns across the marble floor, blue and silver and violet. She had cleaned those windows 100 times, standing on tall ladders with a bucket and cloth, making the glass shine until it seemed to disappear. She had been content then, invisible and safe in her insignificance. How had everything changed so completely in just 3 days? "We have additional testimony," Elder Marcus announced, and Lila's attention snapped back to the council. Her stomach dropped as Beta James stepped forward from his position near the throne. Beta James was second only to the Alpha King himself, a warrior of legendary skill, with scars crossing his face like a map of battles won. He had never spoken to Lila directly in all her years at the palace, but she had seen him often, had admired from a distance the way he commanded respect with his mere presence. Now that presence was turned against her, and she felt the full weight of her powerlessness. "Beta James, you examined the accused's quarters personally, correct?" Elder Marcus asked. "I did," James confirmed, his voice deep and gravelly. The pendant was concealed beneath a loose floorboard under her mattress. She had also hidden a collection of silver coins, far more than an Omega servant would earn honestly. More lies, more fabricated evidence. Lila's knees threatened to buckle. "I never touched those coins," she whispered, but no one was listening anymore. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The council members leaned toward each other, conferring in low voices that Lila could not distinguish. She watched their faces, trying to read her. Fate in the movement of their lips, the furrowing of their brows. Elder Thorne, a woman with iron-gray hair and hands twisted by age, shook her head slowly. Elder Marcus's expression remained carved from granite. The youngest council member, Elder David, looked almost apologetic, but he did not speak up in her defense. Minutes stretched like hours, and Lila's legs began to tremble from standing so long, from carrying the weight of terror and injustice that pressed down on her shoulders like physical stones. She thought about her mother, who had died when Lila was 12, leaving her alone in a world that had no place for Omegas without wolves. Her mother had always told her to be good, to work hard, to never draw attention, and Lila had followed that advice faithfully. Look where it had brought her. The council has reached a decision. Elder Marcus's pronouncement cut through Lila's spiraling thoughts. The hall fell silent, every breath held, every eye watching. "Lila Thorne, you have been found guilty of theft of Sacred Pack property. The penalty for such a crime is death by silver poisoning or permanent exile from Pack lands. However, given your youth and your previously unblemished record, we are inclined toward mercy. Exile. The word should have brought relief, but instead it felt like another kind of death. To be cast out from your pack, was to become rogue, to lose the protection and connection that sustained a wolf's very soul. Except Lila had no wolf, had never shifted, had never felt the presence of that second self that other pack members described. Would exile even affect her the same way? Or would she simply be alone, wandering until she died of exposure or starvation, or was killed by actual rogues who prowled the borderlands? Wait! The single word rang out like a bell, and Lila's head snapped toward the source. The crowd parted, bodies pressing back against the walls as a figure emerged from the shadows near the throne. Lila's breath caught in her throat. Alpha King Dominic had been present the entire time, seated in the great throne carved from a single piece of white oak, but he had been so still, so silent, that Lila had almost forgotten he was there. Almost, because forgetting the Alpha King was impossible once you had actually seen him. He stood now, rising to his full height, which was considerable, his shoulders broad beneath a black shirt that seemed to absorb light. His face was all sharp angles and hard planes, a jaw that could have been chiseled from marble, dark hair that fell past his collar, and eyes the color of amber shot through with gold. He was 30 years old and had ruled the Moonstone Pack since his father's death 8 years ago, and in that time he had expanded their territory, strengthened their alliances, and earned a reputation as both brilliant strategist and ruthless warrior. Dominic descended the steps from his throne with measured grace, each footfall deliberate, and the crowd seemed to shrink away from him even as they craned their necks to watch. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. The unmistakable presence of an alpha so dominant that even other alphas lowered their eyes in his presence. Lila had seen him perhaps a dozen times in her 5 years at the palace, always from a distance, always in passing. She had never been close enough to speak to him, never dared to even meet his gaze. But now he was walking directly toward her, and her heart hammered so violently. She was certain everyone in the hall could hear it. "Your Majesty," Elder Marcus began, rising from his seat with visible confusion. "We have reached a verdict. There is no need for you to involve yourself in such a minor matter." Minor matter. That was what her life had become. A footnote in the day's proceedings, barely worth the king's attention. Except Dominic did not stop walking. He moved past the council without acknowledging their words, his attention fixed entirely on Lila, and she felt pinned beneath that golden gaze like a butterfly under glass. He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the slight stubble along his jaw, the tiny scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the way his chest rose and fell with each controlled breath. The scent of him reached her, pine and smoke, and something wild that made her wolfless heart stutter in recognition of something she could not name. "I was there," Dominic said, and his voice carried to every corner of the hall despite not being raised, that alpha command that demanded attention, that made every word feel like absolute truth. The night the pendant was allegedly stolen, I was in the lower levels of the palace. I could not sleep, and I walked the old corridors as I sometimes do when my mind is too loud for rest. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I saw Lila Thorne in the kitchens at midnight, preparing bread dough for the morning meal. She was alone, covered in flour, humming a song I did not recognize. She did not see me. I watched her work for perhaps 10 minutes before I continued my walk. She never left that kitchen. She could not have stolen the pendant, because she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. The hall erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped in shock and disbelief. Questions shouted from every direction. But Lila heard none of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man standing before her, to the impossible. Words he had just spoken, to the fact that the Alpha King himself had just provided her alibi, had just called her truthful, had just saved her life. That cannot be. Lady Vivian's voice cut through the noise, sharp with barely controlled anger. Your Majesty, with all due respect, You must be mistaken. The evidence is overwhelming. Perhaps you saw her on a different night. Dominic turned his head slowly to look at Vivian, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Are you suggesting I do not know what I saw, Lady Vivian? His tone was soft, deadly soft, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Are you implying that your king is either a liar or a fool? Vivian's face went pale, then flushed with color as she realized the trap she had walked into. Of course not, Your Majesty. I would never presume to question your word. I merely thought that perhaps in the darkness, in your state of restlessness, a simple mistake might have occurred. We are all fallible, even kings. The audacity of her response made several council members gasp audibly. Dominic's eyes narrowed to slits of molten gold, and for a moment Lila thought he might shift right there in the hall, might let his wolf tear apart the woman who dared to contradict him. But he remained in human form, his control absolute, his rage channeled into words that struck harder than claws. I do not make mistakes about what I see, when I see it, or who I see doing it, Dominic stated, each word precise as a blade thrust. Lila Thorne was in the kitchen at midnight. She is innocent of this theft. The evidence against her was planted. Someone in this hall is lying, and it is not me. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a fire, thick and choking. If Lila was innocent, if the evidence was planted, then someone had deliberately framed her. Someone had committed a crime far worse than simple theft. Someone had perverted justice itself. Lila's mind spun with the enormity of it. The Alpha King had not just defended her. He had declared war on whoever had orchestrated this, and he had done it publicly, irrevocably, in front of his entire court. There was no taking it back now. No quiet resolution. This would have consequences that rippled far beyond her fate. Your Majesty. Beta James stepped forward, his expression troubled. If what you say is true, and I do not doubt your word, then we have a serious problem. The pendant is still missing. The coins were still found in Lila's room. Someone went to great lengths to implicate her specifically. We need to understand why. We will understand, Dominic promised, and there was something dark in his voice, something that spoke of interrogations and revelations extracted through less than gentle means. But first, we will correct the immediate injustice. Remove those chains from her. Now. 2 guards rushed forward to obey, fumbling with the locks on the silver shackles. The moment the metal fell away from Lila's wrists, she gasped, not realizing until that moment how much pain she had been in, how the silver had burned deeper than just her skin. Angry red welts circled both wrists, already starting to blister, and she cradled them against her chest instinctively. Dominic's gaze dropped to her injuries, and his jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind together. Who authorized the use of silver chains on an Omega who has not even been formally sentenced? He demanded, and the question was directed at the guards, at the council, at everyone, and no one. It is standard protocol for accused thieves of sacred objects, Your Majesty, Elder Marcus replied carefully. The silver ensures they cannot shift and escape before trial. The excuse was logical, reasonable, and Dominic's expression said he did not believe a word of it. Lila Thorne has never shifted in her life, he said flatly. Everyone in this palace knows she is wolfless. The silver was not for security. It was for cruelty. It was meant to hurt her before she was even convicted. I will remember that detail when I investigate who gave the order. His words were a clear threat, and Elder Marcus's face tightened with something that might have been fear or resentment, or both. Lila could not focus on the politics playing out around her. Her legs finally gave way, and she sank to her knees on the cold marble floor, her entire body shaking with reaction, with relief, with the overwhelming flood of emotions she had been holding back through sheer force of will. She was not going to die. She was not going to be exiled. The Alpha King had saved her. None of it made sense. Why would he have been watching her? Why would he remember such a mundane moment? Why would he risk his reputation, his relationship with his council, his political capital on an Omega kitchen worker he had supposedly only observed once in passing? What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Dominic moved. Before Lila could spiral further into confusion, he knelt in front of her, bringing himself down to her level, and the gesture was so unexpected, so completely counter to every rule of hierarchy and protocol, that the gasps from the crowd were audible even through Lila's ringing ears. An Alpha King did not kneel before anyone, least of all a wolfless Omega. "Let me see your wrists," he said quietly, and it was not a command, but a request, gentle in a way that made Lila's chest ache with something she could not name. She extended her hands hesitantly, and Dominic took them with a care that seemed impossible for someone so large, so powerful. His fingers were warm against her skin, his touch feather light as he examined the silver burns. "These will scar if not treated immediately," he murmured, more to himself than to her. He looked up, catching the eye of someone in the crowd. "Healer Mora, attend to her. Use the strongest salve we have. I do not want her to carry the marks of this injustice on her skin." An older woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair hurried forward, carrying a leather satchel that marked her as the pack's head healer. She knelt beside Lila without hesitation, already pulling out small jars and clean bandages. "This will sting at first, child," Mora warned, as she opened a jar filled with something that smelled of mint and lavender and something sharper underneath. "But it will draw out the silver poisoning and promote healing." She began, applying the salve with practiced efficiency, and true to her word, it burned like fire for the first few seconds before cooling into blessed relief. Lila bit her lip to keep from making any sound, determined not to show more weakness than she already had. But a small whimper escaped despite her best efforts. Dominic's hands tightened fractionally around hers, and when she dared to glance at his face, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His eyes were not just gold, she realized. They held flecks of green and amber, and something that seemed to shift with the light, and they were looking at her like she mattered, like she was more than just a problem to be solved, or a political inconvenience to be managed. "You are safe now," Dominic said, and the words were meant for her alone, despite the hundreds of people watching. "I give you my word, Lila Thorne. No one will touch you. No one will threaten you. No one will harm you while I draw breath. You are under my personal protection, effective immediately." The declaration sent a fresh wave of whispers through the crowd, shocked and scandalized in equal measure. Personal protection from the Alpha King was not a casual thing. It meant she would live in the royal wing of the palace. It meant guards would be assigned specifically to her. It meant her safety became his responsibility, his priority, his sacred duty. It was the kind of protection reserved for visiting dignitaries, for high-ranking allies, for potential mates. Lila's mind stuttered on that last thought, and she shoved it away violently because that was impossible, absurd, completely beyond the realm of possibility. Alpha Kings did not mate with wolfless Omegas. That was not how the world worked. "Your Majesty, this is highly irregular." Lady Vivian found her voice again, and though she had smoothed her expression into neutrality, Lila could hear the fury underneath her controlled tone. "While I am relieved that Miss Thorne is innocent of the charges, surely placing her under royal protection is excessive. She can return to her duties in the kitchens, and the investigation can proceed without such dramatic measures." Dominic rose to his full height, still holding one of Lila's hands in his own, and when he looked at Vivienne this time, there was something in his expression that made the noblewoman take an involuntary step backward. "Someone in this palace tried to destroy an innocent woman's life," Dominic said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Someone planted evidence, fabricated testimony, and nearly succeeded in having her killed or exiled for a crime she did not commit. That someone is still here, still walking free, still potentially dangerous. Until I know who orchestrated this and why, Lila Thorne will remain where I can personally guarantee her safety. Is that clear enough for you, Lady Vivian? Or do you require further explanation of my reasoning? The challenge in his words was unmistakable, and Vivian's carefully maintained mask slipped for just a fraction of a second, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. But she recovered quickly, dipping into a graceful curtsy. Of course, Your Majesty. Your wisdom is beyond question. I merely worry about the burden this places on you personally, when you have so many other pressing matters requiring your attention. The concern was false, performative, but Dominic seemed content to let her maintain the pretense for now. My burdens are my own to manage, he replied dismissively. He turned back to the council, still holding Lila's hand in a grip that was gentle but unbreakable. This trial is concluded. Lila Thorne is innocent of all charges. The search for the true culprit begins immediately. Beta James, I want you personally overseeing the investigation. Question everyone who had access to the temple, everyone who entered Lila's quarters, everyone who knew the pendant was missing before it was publicly announced. I want answers, and I want them quickly. James bowed his head in acknowledgement. It will be done, Your Majesty. His eyes flicked to Lila, and there was something apologetic in them now. Guilt, perhaps, for having testified against her so readily. I owe you an apology, Miss Thorne. I should have investigated more thoroughly before speaking against you. I allowed myself to be swayed by circumstantial evidence without seeking the truth beneath. The admission was gracious, unexpected, and Lila managed a small nod of acknowledgement, even though she could not quite find words. Her throat felt too tight, her emotions too close to the surface. Everything was happening too fast. One moment she had been facing death or exile, and now she was being apologized to by the Beta, protected by the king, treated like someone who mattered when she had spent her entire life being invisible. Healer Mora finished wrapping Lila's wrists in clean white bandages, tying off the ends, with practiced efficiency. There. You will need the dressing change twice daily for the next 3 days. Come to the healing wing each morning and evening. The burns should heal without scarring if we are diligent. Mora packed up her supplies and rose, pausing to place a weathered hand on Lila's shoulder. You have guardian angels watching over you, child. Not many can say that. She glanced meaningfully at Dominic before melting back into the crowd. Guardian angels. The phrase echoed in Lila's mind as Dominic helped her to her feet, his hand moving from hers to the small of her back, steadying her when she swayed slightly. She had never believed in angels, guardian or otherwise. She had believed in hard work, in keeping her head down, in surviving through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. But she could not deny that something inexplicable had just happened. Dominic had not just vouched for her. He had known details he should not have known, had defended her with a ferocity that went beyond simple justice, had claimed her protection in a way that was going to change everything about her life. Can you walk? Dominic asked quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Lila nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Good. Come. I will escort you to your new quarters myself. You should rest after your ordeal. He guided her toward the great doors at the back of the hall, and the crowd parted before them like water before the prow of a ship. Lila kept her eyes forward, trying to ignore the stares, the whispers that followed in their wake. She caught fragments of conversations, speculation about what this meant, questions about the king's unusual interest in a mere Omega, theories ranging from political maneuvering to something far more scandalous. Let them talk. She was alive. She was free. Nothing else mattered in this moment. They left the hall and entered the cool quiet of the palace corridors, the noise of the crowd fading behind thick wooden doors. Lila had walked these halls countless times, but always as staff, always using the servants' passages and back staircases. Now she walked beside the Alpha King through the main corridors, where nobles strolled and important decisions were made. And it felt surreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life. Dominic said nothing as they walked, but his presence beside her was a constant, grounding thing, his hand still resting lightly against her back, as if he expected her to collapse at any moment. Perhaps he was not wrong. Her legs felt like they were made of water, and only pride kept her upright and moving forward. They climbed a wide staircase made of white marble veined with gold, ascending to the 3rd floor where the royal apartments were located. Lila had never been allowed on this floor before. It was forbidden territory for lower staff, cleaned and maintained only by a select few trusted servants who had been with the royal family for decades. The carpet beneath her feet was thick and soft, deep blue with silver threading that caught the light from crystal sconces mounted on the walls. Portraits of past Alpha Kings lined the corridor, stern-faced men and women who had ruled the Moonstone Pack through centuries of war and peace, triumph and tragedy. Their painted eyes seemed to follow Lila as she passed, judging her, questioning what she was doing in their sacred halls. Dominic stopped before a door carved with images of wolves running through forests of silver, birch trees. He produced a key from his pocket and unlocked the door, pushing it open and gesturing for Lila to enter. She stepped inside and froze, her breath catching in her throat. The room was larger than the entire servants' quarters she had shared with 4 other Omegas. A 4-poster bed with curtains of pale blue silk dominated one wall, the mattress thick and covered in blankets that looked softer than clouds. A fireplace took up most of another wall, already laid with wood ready to be lit. Windows overlooked the palace gardens, real glass windows with cushioned seats built into the alcoves. There was a writing desk, a wardrobe that could hold a dozen gowns, a door that led to what Lila assumed was a private bathing room because, of course, rooms like this had private baths. "This is too much," Lila whispered, finally finding her voice. "Your Majesty, I cannot possibly stay here. This is meant for someone important, someone of rank." Dominic entered behind her and closed the door, leaning against it with his arms crossed over his chest. "You are important," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "And you are under my protection, which means you stay where I can be certain of your safety. This room is directly across from my own chambers. No one can reach you without going through me first." The casual mention that his chambers were across the hall made Lila's face heat with a blush she could not control. She turned away, pretending to examine the tapestry hanging near the fireplace, anything to avoid meeting those golden eyes that saw too much. "Why are you doing this?" The question burst from Lila before she could stop it, all the confusion and fear and desperate need to understand bubbling over. "Why did you defend me? You said you were watching me that night. But why? I am nobody. I am an Omega without a wolf, without family, without any value to you or this pack. I do not understand what is happening." She turned back to face him, her bandaged hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Please, I need to understand why the Alpha King cares whether I live or die." The vulnerability in her voice made her cringe internally, but she could not take the words back, could not pretend she was not drowning in questions that had no logical answers. Dominic was silent for a long moment, studying her with an expression she could not read. Then he pushed off from the door and crossed the room to stand before her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I have been looking for you my entire life," he said quietly, and the words made no sense, fit no context Lila could imagine. "I did not know it was you specifically. I did not know your name or your face or where I would find you, but I knew I would recognize you the moment we were in the same space." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear with fingers that trembled almost imperceptibly. 3 months ago, you were cleaning the windows in the Great Hall. I was meeting with ambassadors from the Silver Crest Pack, discussing trade agreements and border disputes. You were 20 feet above us on a ladder, completely focused on your work, unaware that everyone in the room could scent you. Lila's brow furrowed in confusion. Scent her? That made no sense. Omegas without wolves had almost no scent at all. It was one of the things that made them invisible, unremarkable. I do not have a scent, she protested. I have never had one. It is one of the markers of being wolfless. Dominic's lips curved into something that was almost a smile, sad and knowing and tinged with wonder. You have a scent, Lila. You have always had a scent. But only one person in this entire pack can smell it. His hand moved from her hair to cup her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. Me. Only me. Because you are mine, and I am yours, and that bond exists whether you have a wolf or not, whether you can feel it or not, whether you believe in such things or not. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The world tilted on its axis. Mate bond. He was talking about a mate bond. With her. With Lila Thorne. The invisible Omega who had spent her entire life being told she would never have a wolf, never have a mate, never be anything more than a servant. That is impossible, Lila breathed, but even as she said it, something deep in her chest twisted. A sensation she had never felt before, warm and golden and achingly right. I cannot be your mate. Fate would not be so cruel as to bind an alpha king to someone like me. The words tasted bitter on her tongue. The truth of her own inadequacy laid bare. She was not beautiful like Lady Vivian or sophisticated like the noble women who graced the court. She had rough hands from years of scrubbing floors and calluses from carrying heavy trays. Her hair was plain brown, her eyes unremarkable gray, her body too thin from years of making do with kitchen scraps. Fate is not cruel, Dominic countered, his thumb stroking across her cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with unshed tears. Fate is perfect. You are perfect. And I have been half alive for 30 years waiting to find you, to know you, to stand beside you and feel whole for the first time in my existence. His forehead lowered to rest against hers, and Lila's breath stuttered at the intimacy of it, at the way his scent surrounded her, pine and smoke and wild things, making her head spin. I know you cannot feel the bond yet. I know you do not have your wolf to confirm what I already know in every cell of my body. But I am asking you to trust me. Trust that I would not lie about something this sacred. Trust that what I feel when I am near you is real and right and worth protecting at any cost. Trust. It was such a simple word, such an impossible ask. How could she trust that she was worthy of this, that she deserved to be claimed by the most powerful man in the kingdom? How could she trust that this was not some elaborate dream she would wake from to find herself back in chains, back in that hall facing execution? But even as doubt clawed at her mind, her heart was pulling toward him like a compass to true north. That strange golden warmth in her chest, expanding with every second his skin touched hers. I want to trust you, Lila admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But I am terrified. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my place in this world, has been destroyed in the span of an hour. I do not know how to be what you need me to be. I do not need you to be anything except exactly who you are, Dominic said fiercely. I do not need a perfect queen, or a sophisticated courtier, or someone who knows politics and protocol. I need the woman who hums while she makes bread at midnight. I need the person who has survived years of being invisible and overlooked and still has kindness in her eyes. I need you, Lila. Just you. His words broke something open inside her. Some wall she had built around her heart to protect it from hope, from wanting things that were impossible. Tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks, and she was powerless to stop them. Dominic caught them with his thumbs, wiping them away with infinite gentleness, and the tenderness undid her completely. She sagged against him, and he caught her, wrapping his arms around her and holding her against his chest, while she shook with the force of emotions too big to contain. How long they stood like that, Lila could not say. Time seemed to lose meaning in the circle of his arms, in the steady thump of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Eventually her tears slowed, her breathing evened out, and exhaustion crashed over her like a physical weight. "You need rest," Dominic murmured into her hair. "You have been through more today than anyone should endure. Sleep. I will have food sent up for you, and tomorrow we will talk more. But tonight, just rest and know you are safe." He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "I will be right across the hall if you need anything. Knock on my door at any hour, for any reason. Promise me you will not hesitate." "I promise," Lila managed, though the idea of knocking on the Alpha King's door felt as impossible as everything else that had happened today. Dominic seemed to sense her. Hesitation because he smiled, really smiled, and the expression transformed his face from intimidating to breathtaking. "Good. Now let me help you with the fire before I go. These rooms can get cold at night." He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to light the prepared wood with practiced ease. Flames caught and spread, casting dancing shadows across the walls, filling the room with warmth and the comforting scent of burning birch. He stood, brushing off his hands, and headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the handle, looking back at her. "Lila?" "Yes, Your Majesty?" The formal address felt wrong after everything they had shared, but she did not know what else to call him. "Call me Dominic," he said softly. "When we are alone, no titles, no formality. Just my name." With that, he slipped out the door, leaving Lila standing in the middle of the most beautiful room she had ever seen, her mind spinning, her heart full of something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next 3 days passed in a blur of strange new experiences and mounting tension. Lila slept in that enormous bed, visited Healer Mora twice daily to have her bandages changed, and ate meals brought to her room by servants who now treated her with wary respect instead of casual dismissal. She saw Dominic every evening. He would knock softly on her door, wait for her permission to enter, and then spend hours simply talking with her. He asked about her childhood, her mother, her experiences in the palace. He told her about the weight of kingship, the loneliness of leadership, the dreams he had for the Moonstone Pack's future. They were careful conversations, both of them navigating new territory, but with each passing night, Lila felt the invisible thread between them strengthen, that golden warmth in her chest growing brighter. But outside her sanctuary, the investigation into who had framed her was yielding disturbing results. Beta James discovered that the temple guards who should have been watching the sacred relics. The night of the theft had been drugged with sleeping powder mixed into their evening meal. The coins found in Lila's room were traced to a cache that had been reported stolen from the royal treasury 6 months prior, but the theft had been buried in paperwork and never properly investigated. The pendant itself had been returned anonymously, left on the temple steps wrapped in black cloth, which suggested whoever took it had only wanted it temporarily, needed it. Gone long enough to frame Lila, and then back in place to avoid questions about its permanent loss. Every thread led back to someone with intimate knowledge of palace security, someone with access to restricted areas, someone with the authority to move freely without question. The list of suspects grew shorter and more disturbing with each revelation. On the 4th morning, Lila woke to urgent knocking on her door. She stumbled out of bed, wrapping a robe around herself, and found Dominic, standing in the hallway with Beta James and 4 royal guards. His face was grim, his eyes hard with barely controlled fury. "What happened?" Lila asked, fear spiking through her at the expressions she saw. "We have our answers," James said flatly. "Or rather, we have confirmation of what His Majesty suspected from the beginning. Lady Vivian has been arrested for treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and falsifying evidence against you. Her rooms were searched at dawn, and we found correspondence with Alpha Marcus of the Shadow Ridge Pack, detailing a plot to assassinate King Dominic during the Festival of the Full Moon. You were meant to be a distraction, a scandal to occupy the council and the king's attention, while the real plan moved forward. When you overheard her meeting in the wine cellar, she had to silence you quickly, so she framed you for theft, knowing it would keep you isolated and discredited." The words hit Lila like physical blows. She had known Vivian was behind the frame job, but hearing the full scope of it, understanding that her near execution had been nothing more than a convenient cover for regicide, made her stomach turn. "Where is she now?" Lila asked. "In the dungeons," Dominic replied, his voice cold as winter steel. "Along with the 2 conspirators you saw her with in the cellar. They have confessed everything in exchange for slightly less severe sentences. Vivienne is still claiming innocence, but the evidence is overwhelming. She will face trial within the week, and this time, the verdict will not be in question. Justice. It should have felt satisfying, but Lila only felt hollow. She almost succeeded, she whispered. If you had not been watching me that night, if you had not vouched for me, I would be dead or exiled, and she would have been free to continue her plot. Dominic closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms, despite the audience of guards and beta watching. But I was watching you, he said, into her hair. I was watching you because I cannot help but watch you, because you are the center of my world whether you know it or not. And I will always protect you, Lila. Always. That is what mates do. Mates. He said it so easily now, so matter-of-factly, as if it were settled truth rather than something Lila was still struggling to accept. But standing in his arms, feeling safe and valued and protected, she found it easier to believe. Found herself wanting to believe despite all her fears and insecurities. What happens now? She asked. Now we make it official, Dominic said, pulling back to look at her. The festival of the full moon is tomorrow night. It is the most sacred night of the year, when pack bonds are strengthened and new mates are recognized before the goddess. I want to claim you publicly, Lila. I want everyone in this pack to know you are mine, that you are their future queen, that you are under my protection not just as a political gesture, but as my chosen mate. Queen. The word made Lila's knees weak. I do not know how to be a queen, she protested. I do not know politics or diplomacy, or how to navigate court intrigue. Dominic cupped her face between his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. You will learn. I will teach you. My advisors will teach you, and you will be magnificent because you are brave and clever and stronger than you know. But more than that, you are mine, and I am yours, and together we will be unstoppable. His certainty was intoxicating, infectious, and Lila found herself nodding before she fully processed what she was agreeing to. Okay, she breathed. Okay. I will stand with you tomorrow. I will let you claim me before the pack. The smile that broke across Dominic's face was radiant, pure joy that made him look years younger. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose, each press of his lips a promise, a vow. You will not regret this, he swore. I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. The festival of the full moon was held in the great clearing at the heart of pack territory, a natural amphitheater where ancient oak trees formed a circle around a raised stone platform. Thousands of pack members gathered as the sun set, filling the clearing with bodies and voices and the electric anticipation of sacred ritual. Lila stood in a tent at the edge of the clearing, being prepared by an army of attendants who fussed over her hair and makeup and the gown she wore. The dress was midnight blue silk that seemed to capture starlight, fitted through the bodice and flowing into a skirt that pooled around her feet like water. Her hair had been swept up into an intricate style woven with silver thread and tiny crystals that caught the light. She looked like someone else entirely, someone beautiful and regal and worthy of standing beside a king. "You look perfect," Healer Mora said, appearing at Lila's elbow with a warm smile. "The king will not be able to take his eyes off you." Lila's stomach fluttered with nerves. What if I do something wrong? What if I trip on this dress or say the wrong words or freeze in front of everyone? Mora squeezed her hand gently. "Then you will recover and continue, because that is what strong women do. But I do not think you will falter, child. I think you will shine like you were always meant to." Music began outside, drums and flutes signaling the start of the ceremony. An attendant opened the tent flap, and Lila took a deep breath, gathering her courage. She stepped out into the twilight, and the path before her was lined with pack members holding torches that lit her way to the platform. Every eye was on her, hundreds of faces watching as she walked alone toward her fate. Dominic waited on the platform, dressed in ceremonial robes of black and silver, his hair unbound and falling past his shoulders. He looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful and commanding and utterly magnificent. But when his eyes found her, when he watched her approach, all that raw power was focused entirely on her, with an intensity that stole her breath. Lila climbed the steps to the platform, and Dominic extended his hand. She took it, and that golden warmth in her chest exploded into something bigger, something that sang through her veins and lit up every nerve ending. The crowd gasped collectively, and Lila realized with shock that she was glowing, actual silver light emanating from her skin, brightest where her hand joined Dominic's. "Your wolf," Dominic breathed, wonder in his voice. "Lila, your wolf is waking." And it was true. For the first time in her life, Lila felt it, a presence in her mind that was both foreign and intimately familiar, a second consciousness that had been sleeping deep inside her, waiting for this exact moment. "I feel her," Lila whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Dominic, I can feel my wolf." The ceremony proceeded in a haze of emotion and revelation, anointed them both with sacred oils, bound their wrists together with silver cord, and spoke the ancient words that recognized mate bonds before the moon goddess. When it came time for Dominic to claim her verbally, his voice rang out clear and strong across the clearing. "I claim this woman as my mate, my queen, my other half for all eternity. Lila Thorne, you are mine in this life and every life to come. I will protect you, cherish you, stand beside you through every challenge and every joy. My heart beats only for you." Then it was Lila's turn, and she spoke the words that came not from memory, but from the deepest part of her soul. "I accept your claim, Dominic King. I choose you as my mate, my partner, my home. I give you my loyalty, my trust, my love freely and completely. Where you go, I will go. Your pack is my pack. Your future is my future." The silver light surrounding them intensified until it was blinding, and when it faded, something fundamental had shifted. Lila could feel the mate bond now, a living thing that connected her heart to Dominic's, that let her sense his emotions as clearly as her own. And through that bond came love so fierce and deep, it brought her to her knees. Dominic caught her, always catching her, and claimed her mouth in a kiss that sealed their bond before goddess and pack. The clearing erupted in celebration, howls rising to the full moon above, but Lila heard none of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the man holding her, to the bond. Humming between them, to the wolf finally awakening in her soul. "I love you," she said against his lips, the words feeling both inadequate and absolutely perfect. "I love you, Dominic. My mate. My king. Dominic's answering smile was fierce with possession and tenderness in equal measure. And I love you, my queen. My salvation. The missing piece of my soul finally found. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her down from the platform toward the palace as the pack cheered and celebrated. Around them, the future stretched before them, unknown and slightly terrifying. But Lila was not afraid. She had her mate, her wolf, and a strength she had never known she possessed. Whatever came next, they would face it together. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?